Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our 3 of 5 sessions on writers writing the world. I want to begin today by making one brief point and then one more extended point about unfolding world events. I talked yesterday about this extraordinary phenomenon that's happening all around the world, but with particular dramatic impact in England, in East Anglia, over U.S. Military bases at Mildenhall and Lakenheath, where the United States has its nuclear weapons, and also the northeastern seaboard of the United States, particularly in New Jersey. There have been so many sightings of UAP that the mass media is referring to as drones, that the lieutenant governor last night called for a limited state of emergency. And the U.S. House of Representatives had a very quickly organized hearing. They called in the FBI and members of the Pentagon, and they said, "We don't know." And so I want us all, insofar as you can, the mainstream media is generally uninterested in these matters, but alternative media and social media, it's all over social media, to just continue to look for the news about this unidentified anomalous phenomena who are concentrating in our world today in the aftermath of the escalation of nuclear tensions in Ukraine. I want also today to comment on what's going on in Syria. I've had multiple requests for my comments. I have been studying it very, very closely. There's a lot that I can say, but in the very few minutes I have, I want to give everybody the context for what's taking place. Oftentimes in our news media, they don't mention anything till it's either a crisis or something of a dramatic nature. And we experience it as what has been called a black swan event, like 9/11. It just pops up. The 2008 market crash, it just pops up. And then all of a sudden, people realize that the world has changed. And it's referred to as a black swan event. And Syria has been, to many observers, a black swan event. Where did this come from? How did the Assad regime collapse in such a undisciplined and hasty way over 2 weeks? And now the Middle East has been completely reorganized. Let's step back. Israel and the United States have been orchestrating to this end for over 25 years. It was in 1996 that Benjamin Netanyahu, who was prime minister then, he's the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history, proposed that the United States and Israel remake the Middle East by deposing most of the Middle Eastern governments to create confusion and chaos, to allow Israel to expand. You just saw that over the last couple of days in Syria. Within 24 hours of the Assad government collapsing, Israel had pushed into Syria, expanded the boundaries all along the Golan Heights, which is already being illegally occupied according to international law. And over the last couple of days, they've launched over 400 bombing missions over Syria, destroying everything that they can find in the military and command structure, infrastructure. This isn't just happening out of the blue. After 9/11, the Bush administration, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, developed a Pentagon directive that not only called for the dismantlement of Russia into separate countries so they could be exploited by US corporations, but they had a plan for the Middle East that had been suggested by Netanyahu. And actually, the implementation had begun under President Clinton. You may have seen recent interviews by General Wesley Clark, who is the commander of all NATO forces for many, many years. He says on CBS and NBC, where he's been interviewed, CNN, that shortly after 9/11, he was shown a document. And it was stated in that document that the Israelis and the Americans were going to overthrow the governments of Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and finally Iran. And if you look back over the last 25 years, that's pretty much what's happened. Iraq and Afghanistan are essentially failed states. Somalia and Sudan are more than failed states with mass starvation and mass anarchy. Libya was also destroyed and is now a failed state. Lebanon is essentially destroyed. And now Syria is being destroyed. So Israel can expand. There is a lot more I can say about that. But with this little nugget at the beginning, I want to just give the bigger frame, and over the next couple of days, I'll be going into some more detail. But this is happening by design. It's not happening by accident. And what is now going to proceed to happen in Syria is not just a new government taking over and all will be well. We're going to see Syria now descend into chaos. It's what the United States is doing in Ukraine. And according to Jeffrey Sachs, this is what the United States has done over 100 times since the end of the Second World War, coming into countries, overthrowing regimes, destabilizing elections, seeding revolt. So in the chaos, it could continue to extract the commodities and the commercial profitabilities at will, divide and conquer. This is the simplest and most profound explanation in only a few minutes about what's happening in the Middle East. To be continued. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Humanity Rising. And, when we think about all these issues, we wonder what's really going on and why didn't I know and how can I find out? And it's therefore a blessing that we have people who wield the pen, knowing that the pen is mightier than the sword, who are using their writings to right the world, to make the world a better place. And that's why we wanted to end our Humanity Rising sessions for 2024. We have till Friday, and then we'll adjourn till the 6th of January. And we've already got several months already planned for January, February, now into March. It's going to be a very exciting 2025. I can hardly wait for some of the sessions and some of the speakers and some of the ideas that we are going to be bringing online. They blow my mind as I prepare for them. And so I'm very excited to share them with all of you. And I appreciate your capacity to take all this in. It's not easy to hold the whole world. Most of us want to separate the opposites and go into a little corner. It's the mark of ultimate moral maturity, said Jung, when you can hold the opposites of our world, the agony and the ecstasy, and allow what he calls the crucifixion of the ego, because he says when you go through that, when you're holding those opposites, you're really taking in what's going on in Syria. And then you hear the sublimity of what we're going to hear now from MANDA Scott. That's what causes what Plato called the enlargement of the soul. And that's the spiritual quest. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to now turn the speaker's platform over to Jennifer. Jennifer Browdy. She's been our convener for these sessions. Jennifer, thank you so much for bringing in such brilliance. And I turn the program over to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Another sobering introduction to, but I think it's very appropriate for this session with Manda, because Manda is somebody who is so clear-eyed about what's going on and willing to use that C word of collapse, and a lot of others won't. And I think what you've just described is the dominoes, the dominoes going down in some of the more vulnerable places in the world. And it really is important for us at the heart of Empire to be reminded of what's happening and to understand that larger context and those longer trajectories and how we've been led to this place. And, what you didn't mention is the climate crisis and the environmental crisis, the biodiversity crisis. So that is what Manda brings in. She connects all those dots so beautifully. So let me just introduce Manda briefly in case any of you are not familiar with her work. One of the things I love about Manda's bio is that she starts with the fact that she was born in Scotland at 318 parts per million CO2. Who else do you know who does that? So she was once a veterinary surgeon. She's now a novelist, smallholder, contemporary shamanic trainer, practicing shaman, and the host of the international chart-topping Accidental Gods podcast, which I highly recommend to you, as well as the co-creator of the Thrutopian masterclass, which I took, and I also highly recommend to anybody who might be a writer and want to write Thrutopian fiction, we'll be talking about what that is. Amanda's best known for her Boudica Dreaming series of historical novels. And we're going to be talking today about her latest novel, Any Human Power, which is a mythopolitical thriller in a Thrutopian vein. It's complicated, and I hope she's going to unpack it for us. She lives with her wife in the liminal place between England and Wales. So she is coming to us from her afternoon. Amanda, you want to turn on your camera and say hello?
Sure do. Yes, thank you. Lovely to see you. Thank you. And thank you to Jim for kicking us off.
Mm-hmm.
So hello, and hello everybody, and thanks to all of you for turning up in whatever time it is in your time zone. Yeah, it's just getting dark out there here. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the winter solstice is upon us, and that
Sure
darkening time of year, and this feels like a very dark time in many ways. At least to me. I don't know if it does to you, but it's always the season corresponding with the mood at this time. And so, do you want to start by? I would like to hold us a little bit to the novel because we could go off so many different directions, but
we could.
Let's start by just talking about the contrast between what you're doing in your podcast, which is interviewing people about real solutions in the real world. It's like a very, very nonfiction realm. And then your decision to spend a lot of time and energy in creating a fiction for us that points the way to it. It really does the same thing, points the way to a better world.
It does. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. So, and I did not mean to be writing another novel, is for sure. I had done the Masters in Regenerative Economics at Schumacher. I'd really got to grips with the depth and breadth of the meta-crisis and the fact that we have all the solutions. We could stop the bus tomorrow if we all decided it was an important thing to do. And the podcast arose out of my belief that, exactly as Jim was saying, we need to grow up. Our culture, the trauma culture, we might come to that later. Bill Plotkin says we're locked in early adolescence. And whatever trauma kicked us out of connection with the web of life was a very long time ago. We're talking 10, 12,000 years. And we've been separating and separating and separating, and we've reached the absolute zenith of this bizarre idea that individuals can exist separate to the whole ecosphere. And to the point where people think they're going to take rockets to Mars and somehow terraform Mars. It's a perfectly good planet here. What's wrong with this one? Except that your actions are destroying it, you who are going to Mars. And so I set up Accidental Gods membership in order to help people understand how to reach conscious evolution, how to change our consciousness to the point where we regain our birthright, which is our capacity to connect to the web of life as conscious nodes in this hyper-complex, ever-changing emergent process. In order that we ask it, what do you want of me? And be able to respond in real time, and then have a sense of being and belonging and meaning that arises out of being connected to the more than human world, to the animate earth. And that was taking over. Lockdown happened, and in the second lockdown, so 2021, summer solstice 21, I was teaching the shamanic work online because we discovered we could, because we had no other choice. And I had a set of visions that led directly to this book. That's the very short version. And so part of it, I had the first scene was given, and the 3 void walks, or at least the fact that the 3 void walks needed to happen. And the concept that what I needed to do was to write a coherent fictional narrative that took us from a recognizable present through to a future that we would be proud to leave behind, a future that works, a flourishing future where we are living on a thriving planet amidst a functioning, thriving, healing ecosphere. And I knew I could not have done that if I had not been doing the podcast for the previous 2.5 years. I every single week was talking to someone who is actually embodying the emergent change that we need in some way in politics or economics or regenerative farming or urban design or spirituality, all of the aspects of human endeavor. So what seemed to come at the point when the push to write the book arose was that I can read all the nonfiction I like. I can do the podcast as much as I like, but fiction reaches many, many, many orders of magnitude more people. More people are going to read a thriller just because it's a thriller than will ever read Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, say. So it expands the readership, but also I can synthesize all the stuff in the podcast and go, okay, there's an obvious route through. But I talk to a lot of people who are in their silo in one bit, economics, changing governance structures, whatever, and they can't see the rest of the pieces. And there aren't many of us. One of my former, now ex-agents, said that I can't remember the adjective, but there was something polymath, but it was something to do with unfocused, which, he was not intending to be kind. I kept writing different things. He said, no, try and write the same thing all the time. I don't want to do that. It's boring. And so I am one of the few people where I can go very reasonably deep enough to talk to the experts in a particular field across many fields. And then internally, they all fit together to make a picture that goes, yes, we could do this. It really matters. We are heading for collapse. We are heading for the 6th mass extinction far faster than any of the previous 5 mass extinctions. And we are accelerating. The old white men with their fingers around the wheel of the bus are putting their foot harder and harder on the gas. And the rest of us are just being sold stories of business as usual. Bizarre ideas that by 2050 something, you go, we won't be here by 2050. 2050 is not going to happen in a recognizable world. So, we need to change our timeframes, and we need to get the urgency, and we need to get that we do have the solutions. It's just not the world that we live in at the moment. So writing a fiction that steps out, that actually maps out, like, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and that gets us to here, and here is a much better place for everybody, and potentially not leading to extinction, that's quite important, became really pressing.
Yes, and the other day we were just talking in this series, we were talking about how fewer people read today. And I know you've been looking for film options for your books.
Still am.
Yep. Be really wonderful, because we do live in this audiovisual kind of culture for young people. So it's
and I am endeavoring to put together a second iteration of the Thrutopian masterclass, but this time aiming at commissioners of Netflix and similar level of people, because part of what the interesting conversations I've been having with people about the film and the book is, this is a step too far, we can't do this. If you don't do this, then we're extinct. If you continue producing soaps and James Bond and Marvel movies and whatever the fuck, I don't watch television, I'm probably not allowed to say that word, sorry. I don't watch movies, I don't watch TV, it's not my thing, but they're all predicated on everything continuing the same with the occasional tiny bit of greenwash on the edge. If you do not change that, we are screwed. And so maybe it would be a good idea to think about it. So, but how do I structure a course? And it will need to have a very different format where we engage people with actually where we're at and hold the space for the emotional fallout that will happen. Because the most common response is denial or rage to cover the terror. And that's not, there's no point in triggering people into that. It's not going to change anything. So how do we hold an emotional space for the growing up that needs urgently to happen with people that think they're already grown up?
Right. And with young people. I tried to offer, inspired by you, I tried to offer a college class called Writing the Future. And I got 5 people at home.
Right.
And 2 dropped out after the first week, so, and
Right.
I actually continued with the 3 who were left, and they did wonderful work. And,
Right.
we read donut economics. We read lots of
the obvious stuff, right?
solutions,
Right.
and then they wrote their fictions. But most people won't go there.
No, there's a very interesting book come out very recently called Pedagogies of Collapse by Jeannie Servant-Miklos, and you can download the PDF for free. I've been putting it on Facebook. I'm sure you've seen it. I just finished it last night because I think I know where we are, and the first few chapters broke me. But she's really engaging with this, and she's also really engaging in pedagogical techniques to help young people to get over the bit where this is too big. Because it does feel too big. And particularly, you and I are of an age where most of our life is behind us. And for quite a lot of that life, we were able to chug along with the idea that the future was going to be better than the past. And that's over. Or at least the future is now going to be so different. It's certainly not going to be where we accumulate more stuff and bigger houses and better cars than the past. That future is gone. And we need to let it go and deal with whatever grief arises. And so I think at the bottom line, I think maybe we come to that later, this is a spiritual process before it becomes a creative process.
Well, no, you have to say more about that now.
Okay, let me think so core is evolution only happens under moments of intense pressure. I don't think any of us wants this moment to become more intensely pressured than it already is. It's pretty bad for us, and we're not living in Syria or Gaza or any of the other places where the toddlers, frankly, who've stolen control. This is an aside, but I was looking up, no country in the world counts its military in its carbon budget because it's some kind of bizarre state secret, like the Russians are going to learn something they don't already know if you tell them how much CO2 the RAF produces. But also, all of the net zero stuff is blown out of the water. There was the only thing I could find was a Guardian article referring to some people who'd begun to do some work at the beginning of the Ukraine war, where they had established that the amount of the embodied carbon and the actual propellant of the flipping missiles was equivalent to 5.5% of the global CO2 output. That's huge. That put it, if that were a nation, that ranks fourth in the world between Russia and India. And that was only that conflict. That was before Israel decided it was fun to destroy an entire people, and then Syria kicked off. And then the boys are playing with bigger and bigger toys. And it doesn't matter what the fancy little spreadsheets show us we're all getting to carbon, net zero, usually by cutting down old growth forests in North America, pelleting them, putting them on transport ships, bringing them to the UK, burning them in a coal-fired power station that was not designed for wood, and then claiming this is net zero. You can massage the figures all you like. The actual carbon in the actual atmosphere is accelerating upwards. And when we hit the tipping points, there is no coming back. It doesn't matter. Carbon capture and storage is a fantasy. Trees do it very well, but we're cutting down the trees and turning the Amazon into a place that's at some point going to tip to where it will burn. And people are still producing these pathetic ideas of how we get to change things. So we need to grow up and hurry. And I think we need to make the shift. I think so. Evolution happens under moments of intense pressure. We are as intense as we want it to get. How do we evolve our consciousness? We're not anymore at the point where evolution is the prey animal has slightly longer legs and goes a bit faster. So therefore the hunter that can go a little bit faster gets it, and evolution happens over multiple generations. How do we, in the next decade, change our consciousness? And consciousness is really, really plastic. Reality is not the way our science tells us. There's so much work being done on this now that we could, and Humanity Rising explores some of it. The whole concept of citadel mind that Tanya Lorman speaks about so eloquently is bollocks, frankly. And so I think at core, we could explore the concept of initiation culture and trauma culture. Is that a useful thing? Okay, so this is Francis Weller's idea, so I just want to credit him. And he learned from Patrice Malidoma-Somé, who wrote a book called Of Water and the Spirit, which is totally worth reading. And Francis Weller was a trauma therapist, and he was a student of Malidoma-Somé. And so he has outlined the reality of two separate ways of looking at the world. And one is the initiation culture, which is all of human history for 300,000 years, probably before that. And in all of the indigenous, connected, whole, healed, adult cultures around the world. And the feature of an initiation culture is that there are intermittent, episodic, contained encounters with death. And these happen throughout life. It's not just one, but the one that we tend to fixate on is the adolescent rite of passage, because that's the move from adolescence into adulthood, which that we frankly don't know how to do. And so but birth is a moment of a contained encounter with death for mother and child. I don't think the infant death rate was anything like we've been told. We could look at that later. I think there's a lot of misinformation happening there for various reasons to do with women's autonomy not being recognized. But anyway, throughout human history, contained encounters with death, and the containment is held by the elders, by the shamans. Not all shamans are elders, not all elders are shamans, or by the people who speak to the other worlds, basically, by the people, and by the animate earth, the more than human world, particularly that. And whoever is undergoing this initiation is in a situation where they are taken to the edges of themselves and they have to ask for help of all of these things, but particularly of the more than human world, and they have to receive that help and act on it, or they don't survive. So then, having done that, they know that that help is available. They know they are plugged in to the more than human world. And if you grow in a shamanic culture, you're plugged in from before you're born anyway. But there's a particular moment of gaining agency of that interaction, of I can ask and I know how to hear. And then I come back to a people where I know what is mine to do. I have a sense of meaning and purpose in the world. And I know how to do it because that is my meaning and my purpose. And I can learn, obviously I can grow and learn, and I can take on mentors, and I can become what it is that I am here to do as a self-conscious node in the greater web of life. And I'm celebrated for that. And initiation cultures exist in the serotonin mesh of respect and pride. I have pride in the respect of people whom I respect. And the respect is reciprocal, the pride is reciprocal. It's not the kind of, oh, I got this, I got the bigger car pride that we have in our culture. It's a genuine, flowing, reciprocal pride. And it's a pride not just with connections with the human relations, but with all our relations. That's the initiation culture. Something happened, and we don't know what, and I think speculation is pointless, frankly, because we can't prove it, 10, 12,000 years ago, that cut off a portion of humanity from that knowing, from that birthright of reciprocal interaction with the more than human world. And we ended up with a culture predicated on scarcity, separation, and powerlessness. And that's our culture. You can't have modern agriculture, in modern as in 10,000 years, our style of agriculture, the West style of agriculture, if you do not feel that you own the land and the animals on it and the plants on it, and you're controlling. All of the agriculture we know now, North America, Australia, the Amazon, the Sami, they're all humans interact with the landscape in a way that increases the food production, but you're working with the land, with the web of life. You're not imposing on it. Our agriculture imposes, controls, owns, and that's a separation and a sense of fear that comes with it. And we don't have the contained encounters with death. We just have unheld trauma that stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks until it overflows. And we don't know what to do with it because we don't have the containment. We don't have the communities of human and more than human interactions and the reciprocity of that. But it is our birthright. And we are born expecting that. If you watch young children, they are an integral part of the web of life. Most of the enculturation of our culture is separating that and telling them it's not really happening, and forcing them into ways of behaving that are frankly insane. And you talk to any other culture and they look at how we behave, they look at how we treat our food, any of our food, and then that, you are what you eat, and we are eating poison, and we're eating energetic poison. Even if we're actually eating moderately well-produced stuff, it's still, our relationship with it is toxic, frankly. So if being an initiation culture is our birthright, how do we shift our consciousness? How do we do the healing work to become fully realized human beings very quickly? That's a spiritual process. How do I get to the point where I am so completely in love with the process of being alive that every cell in my body is shimmering with aliveness, with the love of being alive, and so that I know my connection to the web of life, and I can ask, what do you want me to do? What do you want of me? And respond in real time, because this is an emergent process. And all I need to do is be the best that I can be. And bring to the world the energies that the world needs, which are, generally speaking, gratitude and compassion and joyful curiosity, in spite of whatever else is happening around, particularly if there are focal points and kind of energetic black holes of the antithesis of gratitude and compassion and joyful curiosity. Does that make sense? So the spiritual work is evolving into being that fully conscious, connected human being, becoming a fully realized human being to the absolute best of our ability in every single moment. And I think that's really urgent. However, not everyone wants to do that or can do that. And I think there are other pathways to shifting through the world, to changing, to shedding the structures of predatory capitalism as a matter of urgency. And so the book is endeavoring to do all of those things. A really lovely person, I was on her podcast, Andrea Hyatt, said that you've written complexity. And I thought, oh yes, you got it, thank you. You start simple and you fractal, it's a fractal and it moves out, and you layer on complexities and complexities until you've got a felt sense of possibility. I talked for a long time. Thank you.
Brilliantly, as always. Yeah, I do want to bring it back to the book. I knew we could.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the book,
I have a copy here.
The book, yeah, you can hold it up if you want.
This is actually an advanced reading copy. It's not the actual thing, but it's close enough. So there we go. That's the book. It's got a crow.
Yes. So I want to talk about the way the book begins. Okay. I mean, it is a thriller, so you don't want to be a spoiler. So in some ways, it's a little hard to talk about.
Well, we can talk about the first scene because it's basically at the back of the book gives that away. It's not really a spoiler. There's bits in the middle we're not going to talk about for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But the when I first read the book, the idea of beginning in the consciousness of somebody who was dying and then dead, it was very, very surprising. Like
Yeah.
Maybe
not necessarily to be recommended to kill your main character at the end of the second chapter.
It's surprising.
Sorry.
And there is, there is a lot about death and dying and this whole mythic landscape, and it takes us very far away from like ordinary reality.
Well,
Ukraine, yeah.
Yes, although the boundary between life and death, there's a person in your country, one of the indigenous peoples called Handsome Lake, who said the boundary between life and death is the thickness of a maple leaf, or the thinness of a maple leaf.
Right.
So it's not that far.
It's not that far, but we don't.
But priorities change as soon as you're not alive anymore.
I don't even know how to frame what I'm trying to ask, but it's I think that you're trying to lead us towards an initiation through our, taking in of the fiction and going along with these characters through what they're going through, so that we can have this contained experience of death and maybe try to lose some of our fear of death. I mean, actually, fear of death is one of the hang-ups that Western culture has to get.
All of climate denial arises from I think, a fear of death. Our culture is so incapable of coping with. I mean, for most cultures, most healthy cultures, it's a rite of passage. It's an initiation. It's something you face with grace and joy and beauty, and you face it consciously, and you know where you're going, and you know how to get there. And our culture just hides it away and talks nonsense, frankly, most of the time. I wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been in the visions that I had on the hill. It was part of the instruction. I don't often get clear text stuff. Anyone who does any kind of spiritual work knows that mostly it's metaphors and nudges and felt senses, and it can take a long time to unpick them. And this was 100% clear text. Do this. And it rose out of a clear text instruction while I was teaching to go and sit on the hill in a particular place, in a particular frame of mind, having set it up in a particular way for at least an hour as the sun goes down every evening until further notice. And then when I did that, 9 days later, the book arose. And then the instruction was to write the book. And I genuinely thought I'd stopped writing novels. I really was not expecting that. I was studying homeopathy. So I would not have done that if it hadn't been there. But we can tell you this because it really is on the back cover. So the first scene, people, for those who haven't read it, a woman in her 60s is lying on a bed, and her grandson, 15-year-old Finn, sitting here beside, and he says, "When you come home, can we go up the hill and watch the crows go to bed?" That's what I've been doing, and crows are important in my world. And she says, "No, I'm not coming home. You know this. I'm dying. There is no coming home from here. We have talked about this." And he is broken. And in the course of the ensuing conversation, he says, "You're the only one who gets me. I don't want to live in a world with you not in it." And she realizes he's serious. And she says, "I don't know what happens next," which is a bit ironic because she's been, for 40 years, been an anthropologist studying death and death mythologies around the world. But anyway, she's still, once you're there, you realize you actually don't know very much. And however, if you need me and you call, I will do whatever it takes to come to you. I promise. And she and he and we feel the gods all pause in their labors and go, okay, that was a promise. You are held to that. And then she dies. And then the whole of the rest of the book is told from her perspective as she has to endeavor to live up to that promise. And so I had no idea when I was writing it why that was important. And I got to the end and we got to the publisher, and there's an obvious, I could have cut all of that and it could have been just a thriller. And that was quite a big conversation of trying to explain to an editor that I'm sorry I dreamt this, it's not going. That there's not many red lines. There are whole threads in this book that we cut. We did 8 drafts and I threw away about 80,000 words of a 180,000 word book. But that, we can tweak it slightly, but it's staying as a concept. So, and that makes it not necessarily an easy book, but it is the book that it is. And partly I think we need a new mythology. We need an initiation culture mythology that isn't based on hero archetypes of power over. We need much more of an integration with the web of life sense of mythology in our culture. There's plenty of mythologies of that in indigenous cultures, but the trauma culture has traumatized and traumatizing mythologies often. Not all, but often. And also, I think looking back, we know that our culture deals with death very badly. There are a bunch of quite interesting studies, mostly done in the US, where you get someone to fill in a questionnaire that looks at politics amongst a lot of other things, and they can be quite progressive and, trying to make the world a better place for everybody. And then you do the exact same questionnaire, but they're in front of a funeral parlor, or there's a funeral going past, or something that's completely subliminal. You don't mention it, but they just fill in a different question, the same questionnaire, and they've moved to the right of Musk. And then you show them the other one, they go, no, I didn't do that, you've got the wrong one. And it's like our consciousness, I read something somewhere recently, I can't remember where, the conscious part of our brain makes decisions 0.5% of the time. The rest of our decisions are made at a limbic level. And then we layer post hoc, excuses over the top. And that you can't tell these, this is yours. No, it's not. I didn't do that. This is me. This has always been me. And it hasn't. And yet, where you are is where you are. And being in the middle of the 6th mass extinction is absolutely flipping terrifying. And really, really hard to deal with. And we are all colluding in the system that is a self-terminating algorithm. Is what do I do? What can I, as one, I'm one, and there are 8.5 billion of us, what can I do? And yet, if all 8.5 billion went, okay, yeah, we're together, we're going to fix it, it would be fixed tomorrow. And so how do you start the narratives that go, we can take agency? And not only that, we need to take agency. And I think a lot of the climate denial, it's fear of death and overcoming fear of death by going, guys, look, it's not that bad. I think one of the best sets of novels that gets people over fear of death is Terry Pratchett. Death speaks in capital letters and has a horse called Binky and likes cats. And it's, he used to get, I did a course with Terry and got to know him, and we communicated for a while. And he used to get letters all the time from people who were dying saying, thank you, I am not afraid of death anymore. And so I didn't know that's what I was doing, but if I can do anything, shamanic practice, I'm not a shaman, but I'm a shamanic practitioner, and a portion of that is working psychopumping for people who have died. And so the landscapes are relatively familiar. And the concept of death being a rite of passage is familiar. And if I can do anything to make death less fearful for people, that's good. If I can at the same time create that sense of we have agency, because I think the lack of agency, 2 things. One is fear of death, and the other is, for 40 years, environmentalists have been saying, the world is falling apart and it's all our fault. And then, BP created the original climate footprint online analysis so that people could get really guilty and other people could get really resentful. And then you've set up a tribal stuff, and nobody is looking at the fossil fuel companies going, guys, you need to stop. You need to stop taking the stuff out of the ground. Just stop. And they're going, but you need it. I'm going, well, we'll work out something, but you just need to stop. That's not happening because we're all going, oh no, so I just need to fly a bit less and, you know, turn the lights off when I leave the room and do a bit more recycling. And no, I'm sorry, that's not enough. It's not even close to being enough. We need to we need total systemic change. And it's not that we don't know what we need to do or that we can't do it. It's that the sense of agency is lost. It just feels too big, and it needs not to feel too big. So how can we as writers make it not feel too big?
Right. So the characters in the book, just to come back to the book again.
Yes, thank you.
There's a tremendous amount
They
of
take agency.
They grasp. Yeah. And I do want you to talk a little bit about video gaming and the digisphere. And, you know, that's to me, it seems like such a different world than the spiritual shamanic landscape that you're describing, but somehow you bring them together. So can you talk a little bit about?
Well, I am a living embodiment of contradictions, yes. So I play World of Warcraft. No, that's not true. I am currently in recovery from World of Warcraft, but I have given it up 5 times. So, you know, we can assume it probably isn't the last time. Although I really haven't got time at the moment. I don't know how I ever had time, to be honest. It was like a second job and I just haven't got time. However, there's a kind of a generational divide, because most of the young people who've read this book don't really get the mythology, but they completely get the Warcraft. And even if they don't play games, they get that gaming is a thing. And that gaming links you to people, and gaming creates community. And most of the people I played with, first of all, had no idea how old I was. These are people who thought that, you know, being 28 was really, really old. I'm sitting in the background. But, you know, I was a battleground healer. It doesn't matter how old you are if you can heal a battleground. I wasn't brilliant, but I was good enough to play at the level I played at. And so partly it came in because I could, and partly I wanted, this book has to be intergenerational. The movement that we need to build has got to be intergenerational. And I've had, you know, I go to Nature Culture Connection Camp or the Big Green Gathering, and lovely women in their 50s will say, I couldn't read your book because, or at least, you know, I couldn't get past, I had to skip over all the bits about technology. It's horrible. Okay, but it's an integral part of our world, and denying it is not useful. And it is an integral part of our world. And if we're going to move forward to be an initiation culture, it's going to have to be with technology insofar as technology continues to exist and is safe. I'm working really hard on what happens because one person owns Starlink, and I think that's very, very bad. But anyway, how are we going to communicate safely? What can we do with the wonder of technology that allows us to create communities that are not just of place anymore, but are of purpose and passion around the world? I don't know exactly which bit of the US you're in, but, you know, in the old days, it would take a ship months for me to reach you, or a letter that I sent to reach you, and we're talking in real time. Humanity is now a hyper complex system, and we could use that in a good way, or we can use it to destroy ourselves, and that's a choice that we make in every moment. So I wanted to speak to the people for whom gaming it's part of their world. They surf the internet like a dog surfs the scents in a field. It's who they are, and the fact that the boomers and beyond don't get that is not really my problem. I was really lucky in the gap between being a full-time vet and being a full-time writer. I worked in a video games company for 4 or 5 years, so really one of the early ones. And so I kind of can speak many languages, and that seems to be quite useful because there are ways in which technology can be used really, really well. And I wanted to explore those, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing you do in the book, and you model in the book, is intergenerational activism. And, you know, I think the role of elders, but it's really a reciprocal relationship because the elders in the book are learning from the young people as much as they're
Yeah, reverse mentoring is a thing. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Right. So
yeah,
I imagine that was deliberate. Is that something you
sure.
see is important for us to
Yeah,
adopt
really.
in the real world?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 whatever your age group. So for people who haven't read the book, we have Lan, who's actually dead, and then the next person who moves a particular arc, the thriller arc forward, is her granddaughter Caitlin, who was conceived on the night of her funeral. So that's within a family. You've got someone who's actually dead and someone who didn't even exist at the point when she died. And so that seemed a reasonable span of intergenerational connection, and they do connect in various ways. And then Caitlin's mother is Lan's not biological but daughter, and the siblings are, there's quite a wide. Her mother was a single mother, and she had twins when she was young, and then she had Caitlin when she was in her 40s. So that even that family is quite broad. So we've got people who span most of the likely readership, basically. Because, if only one generation decides to build a movement, we are screwed. Again, we need everybody. We need to stop fighting each other over ridiculous culture wars and face the fact that we're actually facing extinction. And it doesn't matter if you win that culture war, because there are no culture wars on a dead planet. It doesn't matter who wins. We need to stop the battles. And this is relevant in Syria. I have no idea why the infants who stolen control, the toddlers throwing their weapons around, are doing what they're doing. Because they're accelerating us faster towards the edge of the cliff with every missile that they fire. And it doesn't matter where you draw your Hobbesian boundaries of nation states, because nation states will not exist if we get to biophysical breakdown. And there must be a level at which they know this. It's like they want to be the person at the top of the pile of skulls just before they become a skull. It's not clever. Really not.
No, I think we're nation states are obsolete.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think, talk to Primavera de Felipe if you can get her on. Yes, there's some really interesting concepts of coordinations and bioregions and how do we, nation states are obsolete, but you and I may know that. The people starting the wars seem not to know that.
No, well, it plays into their hands.
Yeah, and they're old and they've formed their ideas of how the world was a century ago.
Yeah. So this is the question about collapse. How far down do we have to go before we get to the point where we're
Well, there's tipping points where if we go to a certain far down where everybody gets that we're going down, but it's too late. So I think we need to create narrative tipping points that go, guys, we're on a downhill slope, but we can still turn around and go the other way. But we need all of us. We need those narratives out there. That's why I want Thrutopia 2.0 to reach the commissioners of Netflix, because dystopias are not useful. Where we put our energy is where we go. And why? What's the point? Every person I know who's written a dystopia has thought that they were going to change the world, and it doesn't work that way. It's not how human neurophysiology works. You can't frighten people into changing behavior, particularly if you don't give them options of how to do something different. We need to show people that there are options and that the world they lead to is okay. It doesn't have to be beautiful, but it has to be potentially. Nobody puts their kid on a boat traveling across the water in the middle of winter as a refugee because they're going to enjoy the voyage. But they believe that when they land at the other side, the world will be a better place for their kids. So I think we've got, it's going to be hard. Nobody is pretending that it won't be hard. But we can open the doors and let there be light at the end of the tunnel of, yes, it will be hard, but also there will be extraordinary, if we get it right, extraordinary senses of community. And we're all in this, actually all in this together, not the kind of fantasy all in this together that the politicians throw around. We need new politics. We very badly need new politics. I would say that it's worth remembering the political system is not broken. The political system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is keeping power in the hands of a very few people. The fact that the very few people is switching from the old to a kind of slightly weird version of the new doesn't make it any better. We need a political system that's actually fit for purpose, and the current one is not. But we could, this is a decision. The book is called Any Human Power, after the quote Ursula Le Guin 10 years ago in summer said, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems unassailable, but so did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. And very often, the impetus to that resistance starts in art, often in our art, the art of words. And anything that humanity has made, the economy, the markets, all these things that people behave as if they somehow are physical laws, they're not. They're emanations of a broken culture.
Mhm.
And we can change them. We just need to all get together and decide what the value system is that we want to live by, instead of whoever wins with the most toys, whoever dies with the most toys wins, which is what we've got at the moment.
And I think we need circles like the one we're in today to have these conversations. And I think there are proliferations of circles of
I think
thoughtful
there are.
people who
Yes.
are, understand
Yes.
and want to
But we
create.
need to join together with a unified narrative. And what worries me is there's a lot of very slightly different warring narratives, and that's not useful. We need to learn to find the social technologies that bring us together and share the ideas and find the best and make them happen, instead of my idea is mine and you can't have it, or my idea is mine and we have to use my idea, not your idea. And none of these is a useful way forward.
Right. So I think that's really the biggest task for this right now. Like, that is what we need, and we need it.
And it's part of growing up. It's part of becoming an adult.
Yeah.
It's learning how to engage with other people and find the best solution that fits everybody.
And to be generous with it, like you're saying, not to to let go of the competition.
Yeah, because that's built out of a toxic culture, that the kind of zero-sum culture. Other cultures don't exist in zero-sum cultures, and they look at us like we're crazy, because we are. And get to a point where I can enhance the lives of the people that I touch and be enhanced by them. It doesn't have to be I take, and that means nobody else gets whatever it is that I got.
Absolutely not. All right, I can feel Jim chafing at the bit here to get into.
Oh, really? Oh God, have I spoken so long? I've taken up all the time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody, and thank you to all the people.
Yeah, I think Jim's going to come on, and he's got questions, and we'll take some questions from the chat also.
Thank you, Amanda. It's seldom that we have someone on Humanity Rising that's so ruthlessly realistic about the current world situation.
Really?
So in the first instance, I just want to acknowledge that and commend you, because if we're not being ruthlessly realistic, we're being naively optimistic. And that's a sure recipe for disaster. So thank you for your clarity around the pedagogies of collapse. And I want to start there, because I think what we need to explore is the different psycho-emotional and spiritual responses to collapse, as to, say, normalcy, or let's say boundless opportunity, because context shapes content. And that's very, very important in this case. And we talked about it yesterday with Nina Simon, actually.
Did she give you the triplet from Oscar Mira Quesada? Consciousness Creates Matter? Did she not say that? Oh, that comes straight from her book. Can I give you this? Because I think it might speak. So this is Nina. This is from Nina's book, but she brought Oscar Mira Quesada, who's a Peruvian shaman, to do a ceremony for Baroniers, and they started at 8 p.m. They went through till 8 the next morning. So they were quite tired. 12 hours of no sleep right overnight. And he said, if you only remember one thing, remember this. Consciousness creates matter. Language creates reality. Ritual creates relationship. And I think, actually, if everybody tattooed that on their forehead, or put it on a post-it on the screen, and you've got to learn not to project.
Consciousness creates
matter. Language creates reality. Ritual creates relationship. And Nina's got, it's beautiful, the part in the book where she talks about creating her own rituals about her body dysmorphia. And 6 to 8 weeks in, parts of her are going, this is a complete waste of time. You really need to stop. You're making a total fool of yourself. And by 12 weeks in, she's got a completely different view of herself. So we also have to get over the idea that we can switch things overnight
Yeah.
in our own psyches.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Jim. Go on. You were going to say. Nina
Well,
said
no,
something.
I think thank you for bringing that in. I wanted to talk more deeply about the spiritual qualities we have to cultivate in collapse as a particular category. And I raise it in part because if you look at polling among the global youth, for example, 60-70% of all young people around the world believe that we're doomed.
Well,
You
you can
look
see
at
why.
the statistics now among the older people, and there's this growing pervasive feeling that we're heading off the cliff. And so I want to just probe that with you because you've written about it and you've grappled with it in terms of what spiritual qualities we all need to cultivate given the reality of collapse. It's like being in
So
Auschwitz or like being in the
yes, and the
genocide in
Viktor
Gaza.
Frankl of
How
that
do
sense of
we
meaning.
how do
Yes.
we grapple with that? Where does one find spiritual
Yeah.
succor, spiritual
Yes.
sustenance in collapse, where our traditional
Okay.
categories
Yes.
of hope and optimism are
Yes.
no longer meaning?
Yes. I think there's, yeah, it depends how you define hope. But so I
Yeah.
think somebody smarter than me said to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. And I'm not trying to make despair convincing. I'm trying to point out that the existing system is broken, is falling apart, is disintegrating in front of us, and emergence is a thing. And we don't know what could emerge, but we know what inner qualities will lead something generative and healing to emerge, and those are gratitude, compassion, and for me, joyful curiosity. I have a triad that I teach to the students inside Accidental Gods, which is to evoke, to spend a long time, at least a lunar cycle, evoking the fires of gratitude, and then the fires of conscious evolution, and then merging them, and then bringing alive the joyful curiosity that says, wow, this moment is completely amazing. I wonder what happens next. And in that, I wonder what happens next. We free up our head minds from thinking that we have to know the answers because we can't, because the web of life knows. And a lot of our problem is human heads thinking they know the answer and working in a linear reality. We can talk about linearity and complexity another time. So I think gratitude and compassion, being fully present in the moment. And there's something for me about that if I really practice that, if I come back again and again to, I am so grateful for this mug and what's in this mug, and for talking to you, and for the trees outside the window, and for the physicality of my body, and for being here in this moment. And I have total compassion as much as I possibly can, and that's hard, for myself, for all of you, for everything in the more than human world. And I am in that sharp, sparkly, for me, it's got a very specific, almost like lightning passing through my body when I come into that, wow, I wonder what happens next. And those three, I think for me, give me a sense of, with the grounding, always with grounding, rooting down into the earth, connecting the three hearts, heart, mind of the universe, through my heart to the heart of the earth through my heart to the heart, mind of the universe. That sense of, I am here to join the earth to the sky and the sky to the earth. My meaning in here is to be a lens for the raw compassion of the universe, and to ask, what do you want of me? And to hear and embody that without projecting, without my ego and all my traumas getting in the way. That. And then respond to the answer. And I don't need to ask why. When I was told to go and sit up the hill for an hour every night as the sun goes down, I had no idea why. And I could have been there, it was July when I got there. And I was sitting up there thinking, well, this is really lovely, but it's going to be kind of not so lovely in February, but I could have been there for years. I had no idea. And in the end, it was 9 days, and then I had the book, and then the instruction was, now you write the book, and if you want to come up the hill, you're welcome, but you don't have to. And I do frequently, but probably not in February. But I didn't know why. I just asked, and that was the answer, and then a different answer, and then a different answer. And learning to be resilient and flexible and not think we know the answers is really important also. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's calling up in my mind, what Meg Wheatley had said, who has been at the front lines for many decades. And what she said, she came up with understanding that collapse was imminent and the breakthrough not so apparent as it used to be in her younger years. She says, in the end, all you can do is take a stand.
Oh, really? And what stand does she invite us to take?
Well, I mean, it's the kind of stand that you're taking. What's coming up for you, is you had to go out there and sit for an hour.
Okay, yep.
Not knowing why, but you took a stand. You
Okay, yes, I hear you. Yes, okay.
To an act. It wasn't about solving world problems. It wasn't about.
No, it was just do what you're told to do and assume that
this is what you were called to do on this day, and you did it
in this moment. Yes, that's true. Yes.
Authenticity that changed your world, and in changing your world, changed the universe a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yes, very good. Yes.
Yeah. And that's speaking more and more to me. I'm more passionate about Humanity Rising, for example, Ubiquity University, the work with the extraterrestrials, etc. Because I'm realizing all I can do is take a stand. I can't, and I'm here in Washington, D.C., and you talk about collapse.
Wow.
You talk about
because last time I spoke to you, you were in Europe.
Yeah. But I'm now in the heart of the beast.
Wow. Yeah. And I think also it might be worth also bringing in Joanna Macy at this point. There are 3 pillars of the Great Turning. There are holding actions, there are systems change, and there's shifting consciousness. Yeah. Because not everybody has a spiritual life, and we can't impose it on them. But they can have the holding actions, and they can be organizing the systemic change. We could change, we could have participatory budgeting in every state that wanted it tomorrow. For instance, I mean, you could make political changes that would transform the way that governance systems work. Those things could be done overnight. You don't have to. I think a spiritual life is essential, but not everybody lives there. And if we wait until everybody does, then we're finished.
Yeah. And I think the next point I wanted to raise with you, I was really struck by your statement, basically that if the one thing that needs radical changing immediately is neoliberal capitalism. This is what Naomi Klein says. She looks around the world and she knows more about what's going on than almost anybody.
Shock Doctrine is very interesting book.
At the root is the global preponderance of neoliberal capitalism.
Yes.
And the legitimation politically and morally of human greed and competition.
However, I think neoliberal capitalism, I would argue that it's based on the same principles that the Romans brought to Britain 2,000 years ago, which is who dies with the most toys wins, which is it's okay to own people. And it doesn't, that provided we are flooding money to, in those days, Caesar's treasury, the damage to everything else, people and planet, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what we need to change is the belief system underlying that. That's scarcity, separation, and paralysis. We could change, we could tweak, we could live under global communism and it would be just as destructive.
Yeah.
It's what we need not to have is an extractive system based on extraction, consumption, destruction, pollution.
Yeah.
We need to be doing everything, talking to the land, talking to the web of life. So I think neoliberal capitalism needs to go. Predatory capitalism has got to finish, but not if you just replace it with another ism.
That's where donut economics comes in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And Kate Raworth. I mean,
yes.
Changed the world in a dime, and a single book became the Bible. I would choose donut economics.
Donut economics. And then you tag onto it Jason Hickel's Less is More, because about degrowth, because degrowth is how we get there, and donut economics is where we're aiming for. Yeah. Totally.
We've had Kate
Yes, I
Rayburn
know. I
on a number
watched.
of
Yeah,
times.
it's grand.
She's just so profoundly simple
Yeah,
in
and
how
obvious.
and obvious
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Then the next uh, domain I'd love to explore that you were touching on is this interface, this very profound inner space between the living and the dead.
Hmm. Right.
You really play with that seemingly inseparably opposite realities. You're either
Yeah,
living or
but
you're
they're not.
dead, right? But you play with it and interweave it in a way that leaves us, realizing that the deeper truth is they're both two sides of the same coin,
They really are.
and
And
they're
and again, other cultures know
interpenetrating
this.
each other.
Yeah.
And
Yes, all the other cultures in the world know that you live in that reciprocal space.
yeah,
And ours is the one that goes, no, life, death, separate things, which is bonkers.
yeah,
Bonkers. I did a lot of research for the book of reading about near-death experiences, but also reading about people who felt they'd been connected. Someone had died and had connected, and so there was one particular that I based some of the early part of the book on was someone who I think was a surgeon. I can't remember, but he was a medic of some sort, and his best friend and he had played one of the very early, like 1980s computer games together, and and they'd play at a bit of a distance, and if you scored a goal, it went whee. So it was a bit like ping pongs across the screen. Anyway, he got a phone call late at night, and his best friend had just died trying to save his son in the ocean. He just drowned, and he was completely broken. And he just got on to the game and just played it because it was his way of connecting with his friend. And he said all night, he played all night and it was going whoopee, whoopee, whoopee. And that it was logistically impossible within the structure of the game. You could not possibly score that many goals that fast. And he felt it was his friend connecting and saying, it's okay, I'm here, I'm all right. And I thought that it does seem as if the newly dead have more license to engage with the living world sometimes than people who've been dead a while, although clearly people who've been dead a while engage. I say this with some caution because in my shamanic teaching, I don't let the students with me insofar as I can police it, which I can't, but we don't work with ancestors until you've been working with me at least 6 years. And even then it's by
wise
invitation
policy.
only. Because my very early teacher said, just because you die doesn't mean you get to be wise. And a lot of psychopomp work in our culture is trying to undo, and sometimes you can't, the irreparable harm done by the dead to the living because they don't know how to die and they don't know how to move on. And the living don't know how to let go. Because our culture has this really bizarre, toxic relationship with death that is, it's a bad thing and you've got to keep everybody here. So I think you've got to be really careful. But in a healed and whole culture, partly we don't engage with the things that we eat. In the sense that every single morning, my morning practice, I hold up my vessel of water to the sun and I say a prayer. And part of the prayer is, your life becomes light and that light becomes my life. And everything that I eat, it has been alive and has given its life to me. And we don't acknowledge that. We go to a supermarket and we buy food and the relationship to a life is just gone. And even if we're vegan, most of the life on this planet lies under the soil. There is death involved in how we live. That's the nature of being alive, but we don't acknowledge it, and we don't thank it, and we don't. Then I have a duty. Then I have a moral duty. If something has died that I might live, I have a moral duty to live the best life that I can. But that's not an integral part of how we live. But it could be, and then it makes death. Caesar said that the Celts that he fought when he came to Britain saw dying like taking off a shirt. You take it off, you put on another one, it doesn't matter. Which made them very difficult to fight in battle because they just completely didn't care about dying. And so we knew that, and that was only 2,000 years ago here in the islands of Britain.
Yeah. Well, I've been immersing myself in this sacred geometry of water. I've been studying with Veda Austin, who you may know, and that when you take a glass of water and all you have to do is hold it in your hands in a spirit of gratitude
Right.
and
It changes it.
loving intention, and literally changes the structure of water.
Right.
But one
Right.
of the things she points out, to your point, is that when water reaches us, it's functionally dead. It's been through so many filters and fluoridated and
Unless you catch the rainwater and drink it. Yes.
et cetera, that you really, for your own good and health, you need to spend just a few seconds thanking it, bringing it back to life, because you're going to then drink it inside your body.
Yeah.
And how it
And
is
it's full of
digested
forever chemicals now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So there are things that we can do with our intent
Yeah.
in a dead
Yes.
ecosystem to
Yes.
reanimate it before we consume it. And that's highly individualized, but I think profoundly important in a world as polluted as ours. And the most polluted nation on earth is actually the United States.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
Extraordinary.
Yeah, that's the lack of regulation, which is about, sadly, I think, to get much worse. But yes, yes, yes. And this is, this is predatory capitalism again. That all that matters is that the people at the top make a profit. How did we ever get to that? Why did we ever think that was acceptable?
Yeah. How would you explain that, by the way? How would you answer your own question?
Well, it's the trauma culture. Whatever it is that cut us off from the web of life, put us on a path where who dies with the most toys wins, where power over was a legitimate thing, and where we elevated, every other culture. If you read David Graeber and David Wengroth, I'm so sad that David Graeber is dead, because you could have him on here. And their Dawn of Everything was amazing, to the extent to which our culture elevates the dark triad. And the dark triad is narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism, and some people add sadism, make it a Darth quadrant. And yet every other culture, if somebody starts to show those kind of behaviors, people just walk away. Yes, I'm sorry, you're on your own in the forest, mate. We're going over here. Nobody, they had social technologies to ensure that was not promoted. And our culture just makes those people rulers.
Yeah.
And then wonders why the whole thing goes.
They'll even elect them president of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. We have an electoral system that allows that elevates that. And we could, Audrey Tang is another person that you might want to speak to, because she's got ideas. She completely shifted Taiwan in terms of their electoral system and how it works. And we have the technologies. We could change the electoral system tomorrow, and that would be out the window.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just conclude with something more subjective and impressionistic. Knowing the world as you do, what does give you hope? What's the cutting edge of your empowerment right now? What's feeding you?
So at this precise moment, I probably didn't need to take the time to listen, but I just did, I don't know what's coming next. I can predict the breakdown of predatory capitalism. That's not a problem. But I don't know what's emerging. And emergence we are at the point. So Ilya Prigogine, who was a nuclear chemist, he got a Nobel Prize for nuclear chemistry, but he was one of the early systems thinkers. And he says, when a system reaches maximal complexity, there is a bifurcation point, and it either collapses into extinction or it emerges into a new system. And we are getting so much help from the web of life. Once you know how to ask, the help is pouring in. Synchronicities and assistance and instructions to write a book. I gave 3 years of my life to that book. I didn't need to. I could have got a new puppy instead. And so, but it was really important. And so I feel that the web wants emergence. And I don't know what that emergence looks like, but I know that it's predicated on gratitude and compassion and joyful curiosity, and a willingness to be open and reflexive and not let my ego get in the way as much as I can. And obviously I have an ego the size of St. Paul's, and that's really hard, but I'm trying. And so that gives me hope. Emergence is a thing, and I don't know where it's going. gives me hope.
Mm.
But
Beautiful.
we could still crash into extinction. That is also a possibility.
But we need to track the emergence.
And be
meanwhile.
the emergence.
Yeah.
We need to be it.
Yeah.
And we need to, I think, share the stories. If everybody on this call went out and spoke to 10 people convincingly to say, look, yes, things are bad. Clearly things are bad. And we don't know where they're going. But the system is the problem, and we could change the system. And here are 3 ideas of how we change the system that I, person, have looked up. And tell me how you would change the system. What would you do to make, because I don't know a single person in the world, including Musk, who thinks the current system is working. What we disagree on are the little cultural niggles about how we fix it, but nobody gives a fuck about how we fix it. It's like back in Rome, you supported the Greens or you supported the Blues, and it really mattered. If you were a blue and you went into a green area wearing a blue scarf, you would die. And who cares? Who even knows who won the last green-blue chariot race? Nobody. It didn't matter. But Rome has left us a lot of stuff. So all of the culture wars don't matter. But what matters is that we move together.
Yeah. Thank you. Jennifer, any final comment, and then you can tee us up for tomorrow?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for an amazingly rich.
Thank you for curating this amazing group of people. I watched Nina earlier and it was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we're having quite a week here, and I think having you at the pivotal moment of the week is just perfect. Yeah. I am just really, I personally believe that we need to dig into this matrix between consciousness and reality. So consciousness creates reality. Like that's really where we need to go, and nobody is doing it better than you, and with more focus and intention and purpose and passion. So yeah, I just
best.
you are. You do it fabulous. Yes, and I don't know where you get your energy, but I think it comes from what's calling you, and that is another thing that when we respond to the call, we feel nourished rather than depleted.
Yes, for
and
sure.
we find energy that we didn't realize would be there for us. So I think you're embodying that and showing us the radiance of it.
Kind.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And tomorrow we have Cynthia Jers, who
she's amazing.
I think you've spoken to her on the podcast, have you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, her treasure vases. Yes, she's so cool.
So her book, Summoned by the Earth, she's another one who listened to the call.
Yeah, she really does.
Carried it through and has spent a lifetime doing this work. So we'll hear all about that tomorrow. And Amanda, everybody, all of you on the call, you should make sure you subscribe to the Accidental Gods podcast, because
thank you.
Something I look forward to. Every week we get a conversation with Amanda and a wonderful guest, and so inspiring. Even when we're talking about collapse, somehow it manages to be inspiring. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jennifer, for curating it. Truly an amazing week. Some point, I do want to get all 5 of us and you in one room together at Zoom room. I think that would be really exciting. But yeah, brilliant. And Jim, thank you for making Humanity Rising happen. Really.
Pleasure. Thank you, Manda.
A joy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone. If you want to join the
Thank you, George, for the tech.
Gay Org always. Stan, Shannon. If you want to join the after chat, you'll see the link in the chat box, and you receive the link in your Zoom reminders for today. And then tomorrow we'll convene our 4th of 5 sessions on Writers Write the World. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.